Welcome to Chapter 3. Having covered a pretty hard topic last time around, I was hoping that the next note, song, diary, exploration would bring something a little lighter, and it's definitely what happened here. Going through the box of cassettes and recordings and entries, I found my grandfather's old notebook, an address book that he gave me sometime before he passed away. And at the same time, one of the songs that I was looking through within the files here turned out to be one of the songs that I wrote for him, or wrote after his death. Some scribbles, some notes, a story he told me, and I just picked up on it and built on that. Without questioning the timing of that, that naturally became Chapter 3. Even if the dates are slightly later in the writing of it, which was 95 after his death, 95, 96, and then recording later on beyond that. But this one kind of found me without me looking too hard to find that particular starting point. So given everything that I covered in Chapter 1 and 2, which was tough, looking back now, it appears to me at times that I spent more time with my grandparents and was seemingly more able to talk to them more freely than my own parents, which seems kind of strange, but I'm sure it was not always that way. It might just feel like that looking back through some of the songs and entries that I wrote, almost for my grandfather, almost for this, which we're going to cover in a moment. There are no songs or notes or scribbles for my own parents, which is harsh and hard to hear, but I don't know why that is yet. But I clearly put my grandparents on a pedestal and looked up to them. This takes me easily into one moment, one snapshot from my grandfather's life. And I've called this chapter Indestructible. I want to tell you about a man that didn't think he did anything remarkable with his life. He was born in 1908. By the time the Second World War had pulled the world apart, he was in his early 30s, old enough to know better and young enough to go to war. He served in Egypt, and I remember him talking about Egypt and some of his roles over there. And again, this is, the little notes that I made were a fraction of what I should have done, and that's why I'm putting this together now. But there were little bits that I took and researched, and part of the family tree turned out to show his age, where he would have been, and some of the things that he told me linked to this. He served in Egypt as part of the Army Catering Corps for what I can understand, cooking for the troops as they moved through North Africa. If you asked him about it, he would wave that off as doing what he was doing. He kept men fed through one of the most defining military operations of the 20th century. If you asked him about it, he'd wave it off. He wasn't on the front line. He wasn't defending his country. And in that respect, in his mind, his contribution didn't really count. I've thought about that a lot since he's been gone over the years, and how quietly he carried that notion that this is what he did, but how wrong he was when it comes down to it. The North Africa campaign ran from 1940 to 43, nearly 3 years of fighting across one of the most physically brutal environments that any army has ever tried to operate within. There was the extreme heat through the day, bitterly cold nights, sandstorms that reduced visibility to nothing and ground down engines of the vehicles that were operating out there. Water was so scarce that each man's daily ration had to cover the drinking, the washing, the cooking, and also topping up vehicle radiators, all of it from the same allocation of water. On top of that, running through the forces in North Africa at the time, there was diphtheria, an epidemic. So medical casualties were running as high as, at times, some of the military ones. And the men doing the cooking and feeding weren't standing at a safe distance from this. They were inside it, they were part of it, and they were as prone to it as anybody else. The Army Catering Corps, still being formed at that time, notices were being posted for men with cooking experience to come forward, and these weren't career soldiers in any traditional sense. They were cooks recruited mid-war, trained on the move, sent wherever they were needed. And what they were asked to do in those conditions was remarkable, even if nobody called it that at the time. I came across an account of a feeding station set up outside Tripoli. 40 cooks called together and given a task: provide the last hot meal for hundreds of men that were being shipped out. There was no kitchen equipment, so they went to a dump. They found 45-gallon oil drums, and they split them in half with wire cutters and chisels, steamed them clean, arranged them in a row on a raised platform that they'd built from old petrol cans filled with sand. They poured diesel oil and water underneath it, lit it for heat. And with that, with the oil drums and the diesel and tinned vegetables and Argentinian beef, they made a stew and rice pudding. They brewed tea in 6-gallon containers, keeping them warm all day, adding evaporated milk to each cup as it was poured. They started at 5 a.m. They worked through the day. They served officers, soldiers, medical teams alike. They fed a constant stream of hundreds of people, men who were about to board ships for Salerno, who knew what that might mean, and who sat down first to a hot meal because 40 cooks had improvised a kitchen from scrap metal and sand. My grandfather was part of that world. When he waved off what he'd done, that's what he was waving off. He didn't think it mattered. And I wrote that song in 96, probably after he died, because I took some time to reflect, and little bits of paper and a diary here. I don't know why I kept them. I don't know why I started them. I think in my head it was part of a process of trying to remember things and making sure I remembered them, and then not remembering them for 30 odd years until now, which was kind of pointless, but relevant now. He'd already passed away when I wrote it. I was going back through notes I'd kept from when he used to talk to me. Not war stories in any dramatic sense. It was more fragments, moments, details about the heat or the people he met out there. And just a few tales that he kind of recounted, but I didn't really take in at the time, and I wish I had. So my own reflection then took on a bit more detail, because with the starting point he gave me, I was able to then look ahead and understand a bit more where he was, what times he was serving, the roles of the cooks. There was pride in his voice, but it wasn't important to him. And the crux of that is that without the determination and the passion and the creativity of these guys to make their own kitchen from scratch, they had a job to do and they did it. But to get to that point, they had to improvise, they had to think outside the box, and they just did it. And that's always impressed me. And even more so now, reading some of the notes from the War Museum, and it's mind-blowing what they went through. As harsh as it is, it's incredible. The armies needed food to function, and these guys were not... They wrote off their roles as insignificant, but without the food, there wouldn't have been the army, and they wouldn't have been able to do what they did. And I wasn't old enough really when he was telling me all of these things to fully understand what I was being given. But something in me knew to write little bits down. And the song came out of sitting with those notes later, trying to find my way into what he'd lived through, knowing I never fully could at the time and still don't now. And the uncertainty is in the structure of that song. The chorus is entirely questions. Did you see it all? Did you feel it all? Did you see the things that people only see in their dreams? Now, we'll play a little piece of this now, and this is the original version of the song, and I call it Indestructible, In the Eyes of the Beholder. So let's have a listen. This was circa 1997, so this is where the song started. I think at the time this was written on an old Roman keyboard with a sound module, there were some drums. You are indestructible, you are one of the ones. So I put him into a very solitary position. He moved home alone. He was with people, he came back, and he used to think you were invincible. I don't think he ever thought that. This is my interpretation of what I thought he was, because I'd already put him on that pedestal. I'd always seen him talking about the war and the stories and the fact he came back. So in my head, he went to war, he came home alive, and a lot of people didn't. And that's the harsh reality of war. And there's a line in the song later on, one day there'll be other wars again. Wars don't stop. Life doesn't stop. It's exactly where we are now. There are other people going out to war now. There are other youngsters fighting and being part of that machine that maybe they choose to do. Maybe they're drafted because they have no choice. The same cycles repeat, and there will be people standing in the positions that my grandfather stood in and had to deal with years ago. And yes, my lyrics are about him being invincible, indestructible. He was one of the ones who came back. I wasn't making statements because I couldn't. I wasn't there. At the time, all I could do was ask certain questions. And from that, my own interpretation of that was that he came home alone. It did sound as though at times it was a very lonely place. He'd be coming back to England, and maybe I'm sure there were times over there when everybody questioned whether they'd come home. The more I look into this, it's what he did. It's what he was asked to do. He did it. It wasn't anything special, but he was in the same place that at any time he may never have come home, as many, many people didn't. He may have been a cook. He may have been working with the vehicles, and outside of cooking, there would be other things to be doing. But he was a target, no matter what, and no matter how he passed that off and said, oh, doesn't matter, that's what I did. There's a moment in the song where the word indestructible comes around for a second time. The first time it's about youth and the sense that young men carry into dangerous situations, the belief that it won't happen to them. The second time it lands slightly differently in my wording. You used to think that you were indestructible. You were because you got out. The word doesn't change, but everything around it changes. He survived in a campaign where survival was not guaranteed, and that goes back to the point that they're all targets, wherever they are, whatever they were doing. He came home. And then there are two words at the end of the choruses that I kept returning to while I was writing this down. For now. You're on the shore again. It's all over for now. I added those two words because I believed and still believe that coming home doesn't end it. The war comes home with you. It just looks different once you're back in your own kitchen, in your own town, getting on with things. My grandfather got on with things quietly, without ceremony. That was another way of looking at it. And that's another way I know he was remarkable without him knowing it. And what I carry now, more than anything, is the awareness of what I didn't ask him. Questions I didn't think to ask when he was there to answer them. His life before the war, his life during the war, the years after. There are whole stretches of it I'll never know properly because I didn't ask the questions. I was young and I thought there would always be more time, and then there wasn't. So looking back over the family history, I'm trying to piece things together and trace those lines back. There are gaps everywhere. Documents survive, dates survive, but there's a kind of information that doesn't survive in the records. It survives in stories that are told in kitchens and sheds and gardens to people who are paying enough attention to hold on to them. I wasn't always paying that kind of attention. I admit that, and I wish I had done. That's one of the quiet cruelties of growing up. You're handed things before you know how to hold them, I think. You're given information before you know what to do with it. And you always think that there's more time than there actually is. I'll get around to that later. I tried to ask him, but later. And I'm spending time now with my uncle, who is in the latter stages of his life, and asking him. And I've made some more detailed notes before I don't have the chance and the time with him to continue those conversations. And I've learned so much just talking to him. And I've always known him. He's always been there in our lives. And we've chatted and we've talked about things that carry no weight. They carry weight, but they don't carry a life story. And it was important for me to then go back now and talk to him and understand him and his relationships with my own father and his life. So I'm picking up on bits of that now, which is something this has kind of brought together in the year and a half since my dad passed and where this started. So the song ends with a line that I wanted to say out loud, even if it took me 30, 35 years to say it in the right context. This one goes out to the ones who didn't make it. Not only the soldiers that died in battle, but the ones who came back changed. The ones who never talked about it, the ones who got up at 5 a.m. and split oil drums with wire cutters and fed hundreds of men from a platform of sand-filled petrol cans, who told themselves quietly for the rest of their lives that none of that was really significant. They were wrong, but they never knew that, and that's the part that stays with me. My grandfather was one of those people. I didn't fully understand that when he was alive, but I understand it now, and I wish I'd been able to tell him at the time how important his role was. He probably wouldn't have taken that on board. He probably would have done nothing with that. He probably would have carried on palming it off, and just what he did. But in the understanding of his life now in a bit more detail, with the little bits that I had and what I've been able to take from records and notes and the detail that is out there regarding his role, the war, the location, what people went through, I've been able to build that picture in my own head, and I would love to try and bring my own children into this mindset. If there's somebody in your life that's still here, somebody who has stories to tell, somebody who waves things off when you ask again, listen harder, ask the things that you keep meaning to ask, you won't regret asking. You will regret not asking. You'll regret not doing it. And that's where I found myself, and still do. Because there is so much more that I should have asked and could have known. And I have an amazing picture now of a snapshot from my grandfather's life and life with him in our family. I could have asked more. And that's really what I wanted to cover in this song. So I'll play out with a track that I've put together from the old song. It was my feeling at the time putting this together, the Indestructible, the kind of the angst, but it wasn't about that. When I went back and now looking back, it was so much deeper. It was a deeper story that it requires now a more delicate approach. It requires something I don't have now. So part of this journey has been using technology to bring those components, those elements together. And this one, I've taken, again, vocals that I've sampled, resampled, but I brought it to a place now where I can hear the song and hear more of the story rather than the angsty 1996, 97 kid with a guitar and a half story. Written in 1996 probably on the old 4-track and then re-recorded a little bit later on. So this is Indestructible, In the Eyes of the Beholder. And this now is the 2026 version. So thank you again for being part of this journey. Thank you again for listening in. And I hope that there's something in here that you can relate to. And I'm hoping that when my kids do finally get to hear this, and I'm not recording it for them now, I'm recording it for later. But I hope that when they hear this, they can hear a little bit of me. I hope they can take this as life advice to go and ask questions of people around them. And maybe if they listen to this and I'm still on this earth, then they can ask me. But I'm also hoping I'll have done enough in the time I am here on this planet to have told them as much as I possibly can about our lives. And I think to a certain point we try and share. But I want them to know more about the grandparents and the lifeline and the timelines of things. And they're not old enough to do that at this point. They will be. And when they hit the sort of late teens and where I was, I'm hoping they're asking questions. This is your life again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. And this is Indestructible, In the Eyes of the Beholder, for my grandfather all those years ago. And this one goes out to the ones who didn't make it. Knowing now what I know, the last lines of the song, we know what you went through all those years ago, is prevalent and relevant now, because I do have an understanding. Didn't at the time, but I do now. Thank you.
You take me back to the war. When you were young. Nothing mattered then. Nothing scared you off when you were young. come alone? Did you move alone? Did you come alone? Did you see it all? Did you feel it all? Did you see the things that people only see in their dreams? Did you find out? Did you know that sometime it's all gotta end? Did you hold back? Did you hold on? Did you hope that one day you'd be coming back to England and you'd know that it's all over? You're on the shore again, it's all over. It's all over for now. One day there will be a war again, and one day there will be other people standing where you stood all those years ago. Will they get out alive? Will they go through the same things that you went through all those years ago? You take me back to the war. Take me back to the war when you were young. You used to think that you were indestructible. You used to think that you were indestructible. You were, because you got out. You came home. Out to the ones who didn't make it. We knew what you went through all those years ago. And in the eyes of the beholder, the memories we keep will grow so much older. But your life goes on.